homeless and drug addicts. They don't grow up to want to live on the street like this.
I slept on the sidewalk for almost 2 months.
He's over here building a little space for artistry.
Too bad. Check out the background. Listen, man.
I don't look dirty. I'm not garbage. I'm not second rate. I'm a person too. Our lives matter too. We want more respect. We want more understanding. Just because I can't work and live in shelters or where I can find to sleep doesn't mean I'm garbage. Doesn't mean I'm worthless.
Mississippi, a place that gave the world BB, King and the Blues, a state that many folks associate with deep cultural roots, and that classic Southern hospitality has quietly become the epicenter of some of America's most pressing social issues, violent crime, and rising homelessness. This is the paradox of Mississippi. The state has the lowest literacy rate in the nation, and affordable housing covers only a quarter of the urgent needs, as outlined in the state's consolidated plan for 2025 to 2029, trapping it in a vicious cycle. Nestled in the heart of the American South, bordered on one side by the Mississippi River and on the other by the Gulf of Mexico. This is a land rich in historical traditions, proud on one hand, painful on the other. Today, the state stands at a crossroads, caught between its historical identity and the harsh realities of modern life, riddled with social unrest. Just in the past few days, homecoming celebrations across small towns have turned into heartbreaking scenes. At least 8 people have died in separate incidents, with the deadliest occurring in the city of Leland, in the Delta region, where 4 suspects have now been arrested. The problem grows even more dire when Jackson, the state capital, has in recent years borne an unwanted label splashed across national headlines, the tag of murder capital, signaling that the road ahead remains mighty thorny. The gun death rate here tops the charts at 28 per 100,000, a grim number nobody wants. Poverty isn't just a statistic. It's the spark that ignites everything, from petty thefts born of sheer desperation to the kind of outright savagery that leaves communities reeling. These issues don't exist in isolation. Crime, poverty, and homelessness are deeply intertwined, feeding off each other in a vicious cycle that's tough as nails to break. Yet behind all those cold stats are real people, parents, workers, veterans, kids, just trying to scrape by and survive. How did Mississippi tumble into this mess? And more importantly, where does it head from here? Join me in digging in, because to grasp today's crisis, we first have to understand the foundation it's built on.
Drugs. When they took my children away, I fell down and I let drugs coat me. I had twins, a boy and a girl, that got taken away because I was in an abusive relationship. I'm scared I'm keep constantly looking over my shoulder because I'm not used to being out here like this. And plus I'm a woman, I got men constantly coming up to me, like trying to ask me, do I want to have sex for money or stuff like that.
With a poverty rate hovering around 19 to 20%, the highest in the United States, it's no surprise residents face barriers that seem insurmountable. Persistent hardship passed down through generations has kept families trapped and pushed the state's economy to the bottom. The numbers on homelessness are especially striking. A record low rate of 3.5 per 10,000 people, far below Hawaii's astonishing 80.5 or crowded New York's 73, might suggest stronger community ties than bloodlines. But don't let those averages fool you. Zoom in on Hinds County in central Mississippi, and the 2025 point-in-time count reveals hundreds of people packed into shelters, their stories as varied as the Delta's terrain. Veterans drifting after overseas deployments, single mothers fleeing abuse, and people broken by a quietly rising opioid wave in remote rural areas. On the Gulf Coast, in places like Biloxi and Gulfport, the problem is heating up. 200 to 300 new cases of homelessness since January, driven by soaring rents and post-pandemic shortages that have turned motels into makeshift housing. The pandemic poured gasoline on the fire. Job losses hit low-income communities hardest, pushing many families to the brink. Hospitals and clinics, already stretched thin, are struggling to keep up. Housing insecurity has been creeping up, not in the form of the tent city scene in California, but in overcrowded homes, temporary lodging, and scattered encampments across cities like Jackson and Gulfport. If the roots run this deep, can quick fixes ever work? Or do we need to rethink the whole system? Before answering that question, let's take a closer look at what's actually happening right now and the stories behind it.
I lived right there. My first homeless was Jackson, bro. I'm from New Orleans, bro. I ain't never been homeless. You know, I know every thing, the tricks of the trades. I've been on the post since '88, so I know how to get it. But down here, I had to do it another way, but hey, I got in where I fit in.
Jackson, the state capital, is home to most of Mississippi's homeless population, and budget cuts along with aging infrastructure have slowed progress. Last summer, during an extreme heat wave with temperatures soaring above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a downtown encampment ran out of drinking water, leaving dozens of people at risk of heat stroke until volunteers arrived with bottled water. It's hard not to ask why. In a country as wealthy as this one, people have to rely on strangers with coolers of ice just to make it through the afternoon. The line between homelessness and survival-related crime is heartbreakingly thin. Many of the names appearing in arrest records for petty theft or loitering belong to the same people sleeping outdoors outside abandoned motels. Addiction, mental health struggles, and psychological trauma aren't excuses. They're the everyday realities that shape life here. There are many overlapping reasons why so many people are homeless in Mississippi, and addiction and mental illness are among the most urgent causes. In Mississippi, many people suffering from severe mental illnesses, such as depression, bipolar disorder, or PTSD, struggle to maintain stable employment or housing without treatment. According to one study, 83% of chronically homeless individuals in Mississippi have a mental illness, yet 78% receive no mental health care. Moreover, substance abuse often occurs simultaneously. Alcohol, prescription opioids, methamphetamine, and other drugs are frequently misused as a way to self-medicate emotional pain or cope with stress. Studies show that a large percentage of homeless individuals suffer from substance use disorders, and those dealing with both addiction and mental illness face even greater challenges. Additionally, Mississippi's reliance on institutional care rather than community-based services has worsened the service gap. Overall, untreated mental illness, addiction, and systemic failures in public health create a vicious cycle. People lose their housing because they struggle to function without support, and homelessness itself exacerbates both mental health and substance abuse problems. Tim Hudson, 53, is scraping by on the streets of Tupelo after a string of personal tragedies. His slide into street life kicked off in 2017 when he landed in prison on drug charges. Misfortune piled on relentlessly. His mother passed away just a few days later, and his sister took her own life not long after their mom's death.
2017, I had to go to prison for making a mistake of using drugs after 12 years. My mom passed away 23 days after I got there. My sister committed suicide 9 days after my mother passed away. After I got out of prison.
That double gut punch dragged Tim into a deep depression. After getting out of prison, even though he kicked his addiction following a bad accident in 2019, he still couldn't break the vicious cycle of losing jobs and winding up homeless for nearly 2 years straight. He's game for any gig out there, from construction to painting, just aching for one simple thing, a spot he can lock up and crash in his own bed. He lays out the brutal hurdles, job-hunting woes. Without a steady address, he can't promise to show up on time because the cops might run him off any minute. Not having a place to clean up makes him flat out embarrassed to even apply.
The thing about that is, let's say you hire me today, and you say, when you drop me off, you say, oh, Jim, I'm gonna pick you up right here in the morning, okay? Well, what if the police department comes in that night and runs everybody off and takes you all the way across town, and you can't get back over here? If you don't have a place to shower, you don't want to smell like, Moby Dick hadn't had a bath since he was a minute, you like to be able to shower, or you could probably struggle through that for about a week.
Survival grind, hunger and no sleep are everyday hell. He's gone 7 to 8 days without a bite plenty of times. Come winter, one rogue downpour soaks his blankets and clothes through, and he can't lug around much gear to fend off the freeze. Food scraps? He usually digs through dumpsters for whatever's left after the shop shut down. Tim owns up to the screw-ups in his past that got him here, but he wants folks to get it straight. Tim's big dream? Land a steady job, snag a cheap rental room, stash away some cash, and someday buy a little place of his own. He's just pleading for one fair shot at work and getting back to regular life. Let's start with the obvious. Violent crime remains alarmingly high in certain areas of Mississippi, and Jackson is at the center of that debate. For 2 consecutive years, national media outlets have described Jackson as the murder capital, a phrase I dislike but can't ignore because it reflects both the statistics and the reality. Too many families are burying their loved ones. Labels can be lazy, but they also force us to reflect Why do some neighborhoods continue to experience the same traumas year after year? Then there are the nights that test everyone's faith in progress. During this year's back-to-school weekend, shootings in several small communities shattered the familiar rhythm of fall football and family reunions. In Leland, 6 people were killed and more than a dozen injured. Federal and state agencies acted quickly, and the FBI announced 4 arrests in connection with the case. Elsewhere, more lives were lost in Heidelberg and on a college campus. It's hard to capture the full weight of how such events affect a state where Friday night lights are almost a religion. The painful question that lingers afterward is this: how do we keep our children and our traditions safe without turning schools and stadiums into fortresses? But any honest look at crime must also confront the system, tasked with preventing it. The U.S. Department of Justice's findings about Lexington, a small, majority black city, describe policing practices so pervasive and discriminatory that they crossed both moral and legal lines. Reading those pages gives real pause. It reminds us that public safety depends on public trust, and that trust erodes when people feel targeted for minor infractions or treated as sources of revenue instead of neighbors. Reform here isn't a slogan. It's the foundation of any strategy that hopes to endure. Still, even amid grim data, there are a few notable glimmers of hope. In the first 3 quarters of this year, homicides in Jackson have been significantly lower than during the same period last year. A fragile improvement, but an improvement nonetheless. The city still has a long road ahead, and no one should declare victory. Yet, fewer funerals still matter. It means families aren't being torn apart. Children still have parents waiting to pick them up after school, and perhaps the next season will feel just a little less heavy. When I set aside the breaking news and look at the bigger picture, I see a truth that's both urgent and uncomfortable. Law enforcement can stop the bleeding, but it can't heal the wound. Police crackdowns make sense when bullets are flying. On their own, they can't create steady jobs, stable housing, or stronger schools. Do you feel safer with more patrol units, or with more mentors and higher wages? And what mix would you want for your own neighborhood? In my view, the only mature answer is both and, which is exactly why this is so difficult. This overlap is impossible to ignore. The areas with the highest rates of violent crime are often the same places where people live without stable housing. For example, downtown Jackson shows how poverty, addiction, and lack of opportunity can intertwine like vines. Some residents become victims, robbed or assaulted because they have nowhere safe to go at night. Others, pushed to the edge by desperation, turn to petty crime just to survive. The cycle keeps turning, and if both ends aren't addressed, it only tightens. Law enforcement leaders privately admit that you can't arrest your way out of homelessness, yet it happens all the time. Ticketing people for sleeping in public or panhandling might clear a street corner for a day, but it doesn't fix why they're there in the first place. Even Mississippi's own governor has said that true safety requires community trust and economic hope. But funding for mental health care and affordable housing remains among the lowest in the nation. how do you balance accountability and compassion when both seem to be in short supply? If there's a silver lining, it's that more and more Mississippians are beginning to see these issues as interconnected. Churches have started offering temporary shelters. Nonprofits are experimenting with job training programs tied to housing. And even police departments are partnering with social workers to divert nonviolent offenders. It's a slow and fragile process, but it's proof that compassion and common sense can still coexist. However, to truly understand the cost of inaction, we have to look at what this means for the communities themselves. The impact of the crime and homelessness crisis in Mississippi reaches far beyond statistics. Business owners in Jackson talk about rising insurance costs and declining foot traffic. Families in small towns worry about safety at night, while older residents lock their doors earlier than they used to. Fear changes habits. It narrows lives. Yet fear can also numb empathy, turning neighbors into strangers. To me, that's the most dangerous consequence. Not just crime itself, but the erosion of social fabric. Politically, the crisis has deepened divisions. Some leaders call for tighter control and harsher penalties. Others push for housing first and rehabilitation programs. Both sides claim to champion safety, but they rarely sit at the same table. Meanwhile, ordinary people are left to cope with reality, a reality where kindness and exhaustion coexist. I often wonder if the simplest solution is also the hardest one, to treat people as human beings, not as problems. Mississippi has the resources to begin again. It has land, faith networks, and communities that, despite everything, still care. The question is whether compassion can outlast indifference long enough to rebuild trust. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real change begins. If we've come this far, then perhaps it's time to talk about hope, even when things get hard. The story of Mississippi isn't just about crime reports and homelessness statistics. It's a reflection of America's larger struggle between justice and mercy. The state's deep wounds are visible, but so is its resilience. The streets of Jackson may carry pain, but they also carry people who refuse to give up. Every outreach worker handing out meals, every pastor opening a church basement, every young officer choosing de-escalation over arrest, each is planting the seeds of renewal. The truth is simple. Law enforcement alone can't save a city, and pity alone can't heal it. What's needed is courage. The courage to invest in people before they fall, to see housing and mental health care as foundations of safety, not luxury. It's easy to say Mississippi should do better. It's harder, but far more noble to help it get there. So the next time you drive through a small southern town and see someone standing by the road with nowhere to go, ask yourself, what will it take for all of us together to make sure that person has a place to call home? Because the answer to that question doesn't just define Mississippi, it defines us all.